I remind you of the procedure in the event of a fire. If you hear the alarm, make sure you know where your nearest exit is, and we meet over under the canopy at Waitrose. Can you make sure your phones are off, please, or turn to silent? Can you also make sure your cards are firmly into the console so that we can hear you on the webcast? And make sure you speak directly into the microphone again so that it can be picked up. Members of the public, this is not a public meeting, although obviously we're delighted that you're here, but please don't join in any of the debate, as this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. Can we move straight on? I'll introduce the officers. We have on my far right, oh, could you put a light on? Does it work? If you put that on. We have Lewis Jones, my far right, the planning lawyer, Beth Howland-Smith, our development, I'll say control manager, but because I'm management manager sounds ridiculous. Development manager, that's what you are you? Right, okay. And Patrick Arthurs, who is therefore the deputy development manager. We'll get used to all these new words, right? You've been DC for so long, it's very hard to get your minds around a totally new concept. Chris Turner, planning officer, and Philippa Stadden, on my far left, also planning officer. So let's move straight on. The minutes have been laid out on the table before the meeting. Are you quite happy that I sign them as a correct record? Apologies for absence, Amy.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Peter Isherwood, Pat Frost, Stephen Hill, Martin Lear and Nabil Nazir.
Thank you very much. And are there any disclosures of interest other than the town councillors?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors Potts and Hodge have declared a non-pecuniary interest in item B1 as the applicant is a fellow councillor, and I imagine some other councillors may wish to declare a similar interest.
I suppose we all ought to declare a similar interest, ought we not? Is that in B1, you say?
B2, sorry.
B2, yes, and B2.
I'll make a note.
Are there any questions by members of the public, Amy?
Thank you, Chairman. None received.
We do have a question from a member, from Councillor Beeman. Do you wish to ask your question, Councillor Beeman?
No, I'm quite happy with the written response I've received, Chair, and I shall be pursuing the invitation to get more details from the officers. Thank you.
There's an interesting question, though, about the drawings and the clarity of some of the plans and what are the minimum standards. And certainly, I think everyone on the committee would appreciate the clearest possible drawings from every applicant so that we can make a good decision if it comes before us. So you're quite happy with your answer?
I'm happy with the answer as it stands, but I shall certainly be pursuing it because they've asked for some examples, which is a fair response, and I shall be pursuing that. Okay?
Yes, no problem at all, Councillor Beeman, as long as you get the answer you want and it benefits us all. Any relevant updates to government guidance, Beth?
Thank you, Chairman. Members may be aware that there is now a 2019 version of the MPPF. It contains minor amendments and doesn't impact upon the assessments contained before you tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Must be somebody constantly working on it, mustn't there? Have you anything to add to the performance against government targets on our agenda papers?
Just that we continue to perform well against our performance target on speed and quality. Thank you, Chairman. Thank
you very much. So can we move straight on to the applications? There is no public speaking at this meeting. So item B1, WA 2018-1787, the land at the rear of Trackers 8 Burnt Hill Road in Recklesham. And it's Chris Turner to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to offer a verbal update prior to the presentation. Within the officer's report, there's no reference to an appropriate assessment being carried out on this application. This was done, and we did have response from Natural England, which was satisfied that the appropriate assessment, that mitigation could be secured via an appropriate contribution. Thank you, Chair. The application site is located to the south of Burnt Hill Road and to the north of Longhope Drive. It currently comprises a two-storey brick-built dwelling with garden to the rear of the property, which wraps around over to the west. On the aerial photograph, you can see that the host site and the proposal site is approximately in this location, with Longhope Drive to the south. You can see the location of the site on the proposed block plan. The dwelling would be set into the ground. I'll demonstrate in photographs coming up. Associated with the application is a separate driveway and a carport. Photograph A is looking back towards the host dwelling. This is just to illustrate the topography on the site. Photograph B is looking to the south over existing hedgerows towards the properties on Longhope Drive. Photograph C, again just to demonstrate the topography of the site, is looking back towards the host dwelling. You'll note that it is quite far separated from that host site. And photograph D is looking to the rear of towards the rear of number 9 Burnt Hill Road. Photograph E is taken from Longhope Drive in an attempt to demonstrate how well concealed the site is from this particular street. And photograph F is looking directly south from the site towards the properties at Longhope Drive. The proposed elevations, you'll note that there's extensive glazing on the property. However, the property is also set into the hillside and is set into the hillside and has been designed to make use of that topography. The site sections on site demonstrate the relationship between the properties on Longhope Drive and from the windows on the south elevation of this property. The floor plans demonstrate that the bedrooms would actually be located on the lower portion of this proposal and the lounge and study areas on the upper floor. The main matters of consideration, we think, for the members this evening are the impact on residential amenity and the impact on visual amenity and the street scene. Officers are recommending the application for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Members, over to you. I'm looking at Councillor Ward. Did you not call this in? No. Oh, right. I'm looking at the wrong person then. Does anyone like to start this off? Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. I am a little bit concerned about this, actually. I think it's rather large, and it looks slightly like an air hanger. I think that having such a large glass front will have quite an impact on the local property, the neighbouring properties. It does seem a little bit overbearing, in my opinion, in that it is almost crowding over the other properties, looking over them, and I do think it has. I'm struggling to sort of support it, really, to be honest. But I am interested to hear the other opinions of the other councillors. But at the moment, I think it's a little bit too much, really.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think other members have probably also received the same letter of concern from a resident at number 24 Longhope Drive, representing the views of numbers 20 to 26. Generally, their concern is the light pollution, the reflected glare from the large expanses of glazing, fenestration, I think you'd like to call it yourself, Madam Chairman. They think that the 2-metre fence is likely to be ineffective in preventing that. I'm not really sure myself of where I stand on that, because I've got two sides of the story and I don't know where I should land, and I am wondering whether other members would perhaps support a move to look at that if they I don't know, if they don't know better than I do. I mean, you may know the site better than I. I used to live just down the road, but there's the possibility of a site visit on the 2nd of April, I understand, if we were to wish to go and look at that, and I don't know whether other members would wish to do that before reaching a decision, because I think that is the major issue on this, apart, of course, from the appropriate assessment issue, where we've heard that the Council's position is that we've got one, and I think members know my position on that. I have not been presented with, we haven't seen an appropriate assessment with a bird numbers in there. We can't assess the risks, and so, you know, this development, as far as I'm concerned, I should probably abstain on, because there are no overriding public interest reasons given. I might be in favour of it if I were sure that the residents of Longhope Drive were perhaps overly concerned about the effect, because people can develop in their gardens if they've got plenty of space. You know, the Englishman's home is castle. I don't object to that, but I think that's all I wish to say on that. On this, Chairman, at the moment, I would like others to perhaps let me know how they feel in terms of a site visit.
Thank you. Just before I take Councillor Potts, could you possibly put up the photograph that you had of the house in Longhope Drive in relation to where it was sitting down, and you mentioned the fencing, because I thought that was...
Absolutely, Chairman, but I did wonder whether those pictures were taken at a time of year when trees had leaves, and of course now there would be no leaves and we'd see what the
because
situation is.
Anything in this area, the topography is always complicated, as we know. It's Burnt Hill Road for a reason. Councillor Potts.
I've got a few questions, Chairman, actually, if the officers are happy to take them. So, first of all, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite get my head around all of this in the report. So, can you just clarify for me, in photograph F, where we've got that sort of bare patch between some trees, is that going to be landscaped, and am I just clear that that's got a 6-foot fence? Is that what we're talking about? That's my first question.
Yes, so the applicant proposes a fence along this boundary here, which would restrict views from the rear windows of the property over towards Longhope Drive. On the site sections, this is what's demonstrated here. So a 2-metre high fence here would limit views into the upper windows of that property, and views would only be over the roofs.
Right, may I come back at just so to the right? If we go back to the diagram you've just had up, not that one. Where you had the light, that one. So on the top, and sorry colleagues about this, the top photograph. So I'm just really clear, because my main question is now centering around this sort of light concern, if you like. We're basically the purple that's coming out there. That's designed to show the light. And how that would, the trajectory of that, is that correct?
That's outlook from that window. Right. So the purpose of this particular diagram is to show that from a privacy perspective, that there would with the provision of a 2-metre high fence and condition to secure that.
It just goes over the tiled roof, basically.
Yes.
If we were minded to approve.
If you were minded to approve.
Okay, fine. Moving to my next question then, which is about the light, and to Councillor Pritchard's question. Can you, as the case officer, just give us a little bit more clarification, if you like, about your sort of view on the light issue or concern that some members are flagging? Yeah. That would be helpful.
Okay. We acknowledge that the site is located north of the property at Longhope Drive, and therefore some from a southerly direction could potentially have an impact in terms of glare from that. Now, our views of it is that given the separation distance, that would probably not be considered harmful enough on the residents. However, in terms of if that was a concern of members, then that could be addressed via a condition on the use of, what is it?
Glass. You could have anti-glow screen on the glass.
A screening on glass, which would reduce that glare. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so potentially there's that option. And can you just clarify the distance again for me, please? I'm being lazy. I can't find it in the... It is in the report because I remember looking at it at the weekend, but...
Yeah, sorry, I'll just find to be consistent, what I wrote in my report. So officers measure that to be approximately 27 metres from the rear elevation to the rear elevation of those properties.
Is that you complete, Councillor Potts? For now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Although I am essentially an enthusiast for modern architecture, the angularity, the glazing and the flat roofs, as long as it's built in the right place, I would submit this is not the right place. I would turn your attention perhaps to the last paragraph of the impact on residential amenity, where it said that it will accord with policy FNP1 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan. Having not discussed FNP1 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, I can find in the text, I would point out to my fellow members that, in fact, it defies FNP1, the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, in that it does not respond to the heritage and distinctive character of the individual area of Farnham in which it is located. In fact, it does the very opposite. And it is, I maintain, sufficiently conspicuous to its neighbours to be an impact, a poor impact on their amenity. The lighting problem is quite profound. It is overglazed, and I can't see any obvious way of dealing with that without probably spoiling the design by taking away some of the windows. It has a simple problem. It's in the wrong place. And this particular site would lend itself to development for a more suitable residence. So I would recommend that we do not give approval to this proposal. And in passing, I would ask, please, that our officers do read and understand our Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, give it more credence, discuss the impact it has, before they actually summarise in the final paragraph the fact that it is in accordance. It is not. You do it again on page 21. I look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Can I just see if there's anybody else wishes to speak before I take you again, Councillor Hyman? No? Councillor Hyman?
Yes, very quickly then. I agree very much with what Councillor Fraser has said, but to me it would seem an obvious solution would be to sink it further into the ground, or further into the hill, which if you want a modern building, and I'm wondering whether that would be a possibility that would make this sort of design acceptable, and also acceptable to the neighbours, because of course it would lower everything down. Now, it's not our job really to look at that tonight, because that's not what is in front of us. But it might. I don't know whether it's fair of me to ask officers whether that would be a possibility were members to agree that it might be preferential or feasible. Obviously, without seeing the site, I have no idea whether that would be feasible or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, as ever, we have to judge what's before us. We can't add just little sort of changes. You know, we have to agree or disagree with what's been offered. I have some views on this site, but Councillor Beeman, you indicated?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A simple question. Could we have just a higher fence? Would that help?
I'm sure the answer to that has to be yes, but would you want one? Well, in the absence of anybody else who wishes to speak, and while the officers work out what the highest fence is that we can possibly have, I have great reservations about this for the same sort of reasons. In the Bourne, we've got lots of new houses, and in the right place, they sit nicely in the plot, and nobody, you know, has a problem with them. They may think they're going to dislike them as they're being built, and then actually quite like them. But they don't overlook people, and I think that one of the problems on this site, and we've had other sites fairly recently, is the overlooking, you know, simply because of the, as I say, the topography of the area. I don't like, as you know, tinkering with materials when I think the whole thing should be redesigned. You know, if you want to have a glazed house like this, I think there's perfectly good sites where you can do it. But I don't like the idea of having to put in sort of anti-glare glass, because basically you're saying, well, it's in the wrong place. You know, to me, if you have to do that sort of thing and put in obscure glazing in habitable rooms and all that, basically it's a poor design. And I don't think this is a poor design. I'm with Councillor Fraser. I think it's, you know, in the right place. It's a good design. But I honestly think the effect on the neighbours' amenity will be harmful. I cannot see how that amount of fenestration with illumination, and the tendency in these modern places is not to have anything at the windows other than light. You know, it's not as though you get any relief from it, because half the time the feature is the fact that the light is playing the whole time. And so I do have great reservations here about the effect on the neighbours' amenity. Does anybody else wish to comment, or should we ask the officers to comment on anything anybody has said?
Chair, thank you. Just to be clear, that for a reason for refusal, if it is impact on adjoining residence amenity, I mean, we can only judge it on overlooking, and the officer's assessment has gone some way to demonstrate that overlooking with the appropriate measures simply from a planning policy perspective of the local plan isn't considered to be in existence. We understand members' concerns, but I just to be clear that I'm not entirely sure from a planning policy point of view that we've stated that that isn't an issue.
Could we just go back then to the points that we're supposed to be looking at right at the beginning, Chris? You know, the areas of consideration. So you're basically saying we can't disagree with you.
Not at all. Obviously, it is members' prerogative to make a decision as they see fit. I'm just rehearsing a conversation in my head. Should it be overturned?
Thank you, Patrick. Councillor Hyman?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I think this is actually a combination of FMP1 design and overlooking, and although perhaps individually each of them would not be reasons some might think they are, I think that together we do have to consider them, and I'm wondering where we stand on that. You know, in combination effective policies, it is a planning balance, isn't it? And I'm just wondering whether on balance we are able to say, you know, and also, you know, as far as I'm concerned, Chairman, you know that we've also got the appropriate assessment issue. So I would be, I am still in two minds on this. I'd like to know where we stand in terms of the combination, the balance of the two policies.
Yes, can I just seek even further clarity from Councillor Potts? You know, on that diagram where you're showing light as such, I mean, when you have a big expanse of glazed area, the light just glows. You see it from a distance. I mean, this happens all over the Bourne. You look up and you've got this glow. You don't have a beam of light, you have a glow. And that's my issue with this, that, you know, I'm still not convinced that there won't be a harmful effect on the neighbouring properties in Longhope Drive. And I don't know what comfort you can give me, but I don't see light sort of going out in that neat pattern. I know it does scientifically, but, you know, when you are living with light nearby, you just have a constant glow. Did Councillor Fraser indicate again? Now I'll take you, Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief because I'm at risk of repeating myself. I take the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan as being a legitimate, approved planning document. And it says clearly there that in accordance with FNP1, it should respond to the heritage and distinctive character of the individual area of Farnham in which it is located. This building patently does the reverse. And on that ground alone, I would oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pritchard, do you wish to come back?
Just quickly, Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. I think ultimately it's not in keeping with the street scene. And really, with that amount of glare, I appreciate what the officer said, that he feels that, you know, it's enough distance. Well, the sun carries many thousands of miles of glare, so, and that, you know, light can be seen, you know, quite a long way.
Beth wants to come back before... Oh, sorry, did you indicate, Councillor Ward? No. Oh, no. Right, we'll just take Beth then, and then we'll move to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification. The picture on the slide above you is actually what the sight lines, basically, what people can see from that first floor level. I would further go on to say that in your residential extensions SPD, it sets out acceptable separation distances, and these, please correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, they far exceed the recommended distances.
Yeah, they meet the recommended distances in terms of the distance between dwellings, in terms of the distance from habitable rooms to the amenity of neighbouring residents. It doesn't meet the guidance in that sense, however, owing to the topography of the land and the presence of a strong boundary treatment, we think that would reduce the harm in that instance.
So, Chairman, I think the strongest reason for refusal, if members were so minded, would be the FNP1 argument on design and the normal D1, D4 arguments. I think they would be your strongest reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
I got a little bit confused with Chris's explanation. I do apologise. Could you just go over that again briefly so that we can move to the recommendation with certainty?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the residential extensions SVD sets out distance from habitable windows to the rear of existing neighbours, and that distance, and it also sets out the distance from habitable windows to the amenity space of adjoining neighbours. Now, in this particular instance, the dwelling meets the separation distance from the rear of the elevation to the rear of the existing neighbour. However, there's a shortfall between the rear of the elevation to the amenity space of numbers 20 to 24, I think it's 24 Longhope Drive. Now, as set out in the officer's report, with an appropriate boundary, because of the topography of the land, the views as demonstrated on that site section would be very limited into the amenity space of the neighbour immediately to the rear. So despite that technical shortfall in the distance from the rear elevation to the amenity space of that neighbour, officers don't consider that shortfall to be harmful, given the presence of the boundary treatment, and given the separation distance from the rear elevation to the rear of that dwelling, of the neighbour, we don't consider it would be harmful in that aspect either. Does that clear up the point?
I think we understand as much as we're going to that.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris. It's not your explanation. It's just that when you get onto these on-balance bits, it's always difficult. Now, I'd like to move to the recommendation, unless anyone has got something very new to say. Councillor Story?
Yes, Chairman, just briefly. I've just looked up the Farnham design statement, which is a material planning consideration. Shortheath and Boundstone, new development should respect the pattern of existing development in terms of scale and materials. And I don't think this matches in either of those cases.
Right. If everyone's happy, can we move then to the recommendation, which is on page 22. I don't think it's changed, has it? On page 22 of your report, that permission be granted. Can I see all those, please, in favour of granting permission?
That's none, Chairman.
Right, can I see all those, please, who are against granting permission?
That's 8, Chairman.
And do we have any abstentions?
1.
So please could I have an alternative resolution? Councillor Pritchard?
That it be refused, Mr. Chair.
Do you have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Ward, thank you very much. Could we now have some reasons? Beth has given us some indication of the way we ought to be going. Councillor Story, do you want to begin and sort of elaborate a bit?
Sorry, I've forgotten the policy. It was NEP 2. NEP,
Sorry, it was the fact that you started with the design statement as well, so I thought we probably ought to include both.
Yes, well, certainly it's the Farnham design statement, which I believe is 2010, and it's the section on Shortheath and Boundstone, design guideline 3, which suggests that new development should respect the existing development in terms of scale and materials. And this certainly doesn't in materials.
So we are saying that permission should be refused in respect of, need help from the officers here to get it into the correct form, that this fails to comply in respect of materials with either the design statement or FMP1 of the Farnham neighbourhood plan. Any other matters that somebody wishes to add?
Again.
And D1 and D4 you mentioned as well, didn't you? Yeah. So have you got some form there that is, or you're just scribbling away? Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. The reason for refusal would be that the proposed dwelling would be considered out of keeping with the character and appearance of the area, in conflict with policy FMP1 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, the Farnham Design Statement, retained policies D1 and D4 of the Local Plan 2002, and policy TD1 of the Local Plan Part 1 2018. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So for those reasons, can I put the alternative proposal that permission be refused for the reasons that Chris has just read out to us? Can I see all those in favour of a refusal, please?
That's 8, Chairman.
Anybody against refusing? Any abstention?
1, Chairman.
So permission is refused. Thank you very much indeed. Right, moving on to the last item on the agenda, item B2, WA 2018-1972, land at number 1 Water Lane in Farnham, and it's Philippa Stadden who's going to present to us, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just as a verbal update, I'd like to confirm that an appropriate assessment was carried out for this application, and Natural England, as the statutory consultee, have confirmed they have no objection to the application or the appropriate assessment, as long as the relevant avoidance and mitigation measures specified in the appropriate assessment are secured. I can confirm that the applicant has entered into a legal agreement in line with the Thames Basin Heath avoidance strategy as set out in the officer report. So the application seeks outline permission for the erection of one detached 4-bedroom dwelling with all matters reserved for future consideration. These matters would include the appearance, layout, scale, landscaping and access. So on this side we have the location plan, and we can see that the site outlined in red is to the northwest of Water Lane, and is accessed via an unmade track which provides access to 2 dwellings, which are number 1 and number 2 Water Lane. The site, again outlined in red, comprises part of the garden of number 1 and features a number of outbuildings which are located sort of to the rear here and one shed at the front here. In the aerial photograph we can see the site here located in reasonably close proximity to Sainsbury's supermarket. This is the Monkton Lane sewage treatment works, and this is the A325 leading to the 6 Bells roundabout. I provided some site photographs. Photograph A is taken from the northeast, looking towards the existing access for number 1. Photograph B is taken from the southwest, looking towards the existing outbuildings to the rear of the site. C is taken from the southwest, looking towards the rear of the site again, but from outside of the application site. D is taken from the southeast, looking again towards the access from the lane. Photograph E is taken from the west, looking towards the eastern boundary of the site. F is taken from the southeast, looking towards the front boundary of the site, so that access is here. Photograph G is looking down the track towards Water Lane, and H is looking towards the front of the site from the rear. So as previously noted, this application seeks outline permission with all matters reserved. That said, the applicant has provided indicative plans to demonstrate what could be provided on site, and this has aided the assessment and the officer recommendation. I've shown a few things of note on this slide. So the applicant has demonstrated that access would be provided via the existing access for number 1. They've also demonstrated that 3 off-street parking spaces can be provided, 2 to the front and 1 in an integral garage, should that design come forward at reserve matters stage. You will have noted from the officer report that the ancient woodland boundary is in reasonable proximity to the site. However, in line with the Forestry Commission's standing advice, the applicant has demonstrated that all development would be sited outside of the 15-metre buffer zone. As I said, this is an outline permission, but the applicant has provided indicative elevations to demonstrate what sort of dwelling could come forward. They're not in great quality, I do apologise, but it does demonstrate the sort of design that could be brought forward at reserve matters stage. Similarly, we have indicative floor plans to demonstrate the floor plan of the dwelling as it could be brought forward. So, as set out in the officer's report, the proposal is recommended for approval. It seeks outline permission for the erection of one detached dwelling, and members are asked to consider the principle of development here today. And again, just to reiterate, you're reminded that appearance, layout, scale, landscaping and access are matters reserved for a future consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Not a lot to debate here. We've got a fairly square bit of land, and we're looking here for the principle of development. Design doesn't come into it at this stage. Access we have had clarification on. Does anybody wish to speak to this? Councillor Hyman?
Sorry, I should have asked if there was a ward councillor who wished to speak to it first, but I don't think there is there? Would you wish to speak to it first, Councillor Story? Okay. Well, yes, this is an application. I think it's very important that we are seen to be giving this proper consideration for the reasons given at the beginning of the meeting. Now, my concern with this is, to some extent, the tree line to the south-east there, by where it says off-street parking for 3 vehicles, but actually, you can see that large row of trees, and down below that there's there's where the water comes out from what I think is the Bourne and Nadder streams, or perhaps just the Nadder, and there's lots of sounds of rushing water, and it's lots of trees there. It's not down as being ancient woodland, but I think it's a very important screen for this development from the road, and I'm wondering whether perhaps we should have something in this in terms of the principle of development restricts it so that those can't be removed. As he said, there's not a great deal to talk about other than that. The access, I think, is reasonable from the other property. And the other matter of principle, of course, is one which I know has been, to some minds, closed off by saying that there is an appropriate assessment, but there is no bird population data and no assessment of mitigation. There's we do know from the appropriate assessment, or the assessment that is there in the document, it states at paragraph 2.7 that it's reliant upon the delivery framework that was put together in 2009, and we know from all of the commentators and Waverley's previous decision also, because in the paperwork for the development at Oxford Park, the consultants even in there did point out that the Sweetman-Powell judgment overturned the Dilly Lane judgment, and the delivery framework itself says that it relies upon the Dilly Lane judgment. So we know what Natural England say was not right to 10 years. So again, on this issue, I will be abstaining because the logic of it is so simple. I should perhaps ask whether you'll allow members to confirm the truth and integrity of the simple logic. I
think we really have had enough of that now, Councillor Hyman. I've been very patient.
I thought you might not. Thank you, Chairman.
I've been very patient, and please will you not include everybody in your thoughts. We don't all know what you think you know, so by all means tell us what you know, but don't tell us that we all know.
Sorry, Chairman, could you just clarify what I said that we all knew?
You went through the entire speech saying we all know. I don't know how many times you said it, but about half a dozen. And that's the bit I'm querying. By all means, say what you know. That's absolutely fine. But don't include the rest of us because you don't know whether we know or not. But back to landscaping, that's surely part of reserved matters, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Philippa.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as set out on page 41 to 42, where I have sort of made an assessment on the impact on trees, our tree and landscape officer has been consulted and has acknowledged the presence of the trees on that boundary. However, this is an assessment that would take place at the reserve matters stage where we could fully sort of interrogate any landscaping issues and work with the applicant to bring forward a scheme that would be appropriate with regard to trees and landscaping. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we are just looking at a site with the principle of development. Can we move straight to the recommendation, which I've promptly lost? Must be right at the end, mustn't it? Right. Sorry about that. Right at the end of the report, page 45, recommendation A, that permission be granted subject to a series of conditions. Oh, sorry. Just for that, I should read out every condition slowly. Right, can I see all those in favour, please, of granting permission?
That's 7.
And those against granting permission? And any abstentions?
2.
Thank you very much. In that case, permission is granted. And that's it. Oh, we got to... Sorry, I'd forgotten recommendation B. Sorry, recommendation B, that if the requirements of recommendation A are not met by the 28th of August 2019, doesn't it make the year fly by, that permission be refused for the following reason, and the reason is listed again on page 52. Can I see all those in favour of recommendation B, please?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
C.
And we have to do C as well. We're getting more and more recommendations. We've got recommendation C there. The formal planning permission in respect of recommendation A is issued on the 1st of March 2019. Where are we? 27th. I was going to go some. Or thereafter, then the head of planning be authorised to charge SIL in accordance with the council's approved SIL charging schedule. And obviously, this is going to be something that comes up every time now on our applications. Oh, that's it? Yes. Oh, right. Because it'll just be automatic. Right. Can I see all those in favour of recommendation C?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. In that case, permission is granted with all those recommendations and conditions, and it's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for your patience.